A
This
gas
isn't what it
station
looks like.
parking lot,
You have
late
to believe
afternoon,
me.
golden hour light.
Looks
A
exactly
woman
like
in a
crime
burgundy
scene to
blazer
me.
stands perfectly still beside a pump, phone to her ear, speaking in a calm, measured tone. Her eyes are locked on something, someone. With absolute intensity, the Tuesday morning sun cut through the kitchen windows of the modest two-story colonial in the Cherry Hill neighborhood of New Jersey, painting everything gold. Sarah Mitchell stood at the espresso machine, watching the dark liquid stream into her white ceramic cup, the one that said, "World's Okayest Wife," in Comic Sans. Her husband, David, had given it to her 3 years ago as a joke. She'd kept it on the shelf behind the everyday mugs, and now, inexplicably, she used it every single morning. At 42, Sarah had developed a face that most people forgot 5 minutes after meeting her. This wasn't tragedy, it was precision. It was a feature, not a bug. In her line of work, being forgettable was a superpower. "Morning, love," David mumbled, shuffling in with their golden retriever, Max, trailing behind like a drunk friend. David was still in his boxers, his hair sticking up at an angle that would have taken genuine effort to achieve deliberately. "You're going to miss the seminar," Sarah said, not looking away from her coffee. "I am aware." David grabbed a bowl from the cabinet. "You're sure about the Portland thing? Couple weeks is a long time." Sarah felt the familiar tension in her shoulders, the one that appeared whenever she had to lie to her husband. They'd built their entire marriage on a foundation of half-truths. She'd learned to live on that uneven ground, had even come to appreciate its particular geometry. "Just a consulting job," she said. "Environmental assessment work. Very dull. Lot of paperwork." This wasn't technically untrue. There would be paperwork. There would also be 16 hours of surveillance, 3 dead drops, a possible courier pickup at Baltimore-Washington International, and 1 meeting with a confidential informant in a strip mall parking lot that would last exactly 8 minutes. But the consulting job thing, that was the story they'd agreed on. That was the thing David knew. David poured cereal into a bowl. Cinnamon Toast Crunch, he ate like someone who'd never developed past the age of 11. "I'll miss you. Max will miss you." Max's ears perked up at the sound of his name. "I'll call when I get there," Sarah said. Every night. Another semi-truth. She'd call when she could. Depending on the operation's security protocols, there might be 3 days where she couldn't call at all. But David had learned not to ask questions. Some couples had that, some didn't. The Mitchells definitely didn't. She finished her coffee, rinsed the mug, and set it upside down in the dish rack with the care of someone placing a bomb. Everything she did lately felt like that, like each action was laden with consequences, even when it wasn't. Especially when it wasn't. By 7:47 a.m., she was in her silver Subaru, heading toward the office. She parked in the underground garage of the nondescript office building in Midtown Newark, the one that looked like it housed tax accountants and dental supply companies. The Federal Bureau of Investigation's Newark field office occupied the entire 3rd floor, behind a door that said, Consolidated Business Solutions. Most of the agents had stopped pretending to find this funny around 2003. Her partner, James Chen, was already at his desk when she arrived. James had been her partner for 4 years, longer than most marriages lasted in their field. He was 47, twice divorced, and had the kind of tired face that suggested he'd seen enough human cruelty to fill a library. He'd grown up in Newark, had the loyalty of a man who'd escaped his childhood by leaving nothing behind. He was probably the person in the world who knew Sarah best, which meant he knew almost nothing about her at all. "Morning," he said, not looking up from his computer screen. "Briefings in 5. They want to run through the whole Portland sequence again." "They're nervous," Sarah said, settling into her desk chair, the one that squeaked like an abused animal. "They're always nervous. That's their job. That's what they get paid to be." The briefing happened in Conference Room B, which had a window overlooking the parking garage and a terrible fluorescent light that made everyone look like a corpse. There were 6 people in the room, Sarah and James, their supervisor Agent Diane Foster, 2 analysts from the cybercrime division, and a lawyer from the DOJ who insisted on being at every pre-operation meeting and who Sarah had decided, 3 years ago, was almost certainly a vampire. Portland cell is still active, Diane said, pulling up photos on the screen. 3 men, all in their 30s, all with the particular blend of arrogance and stupidity that characterized most of the white-collar criminals Sarah's unit pursued. We've got confirmation they're moving product through the usual channels. What we need is the distribution network. Who's buying, who's selling, how it's getting distributed across the West Coast. Sarah listened with the part of her brain that was designated for listening. The other parts were already in Portland, already running through scenarios, contingencies, exit strategies. She'd done this maybe 200 times now, and her brain had learned to occupy multiple temporal states simultaneously. It was either a gift or a disease. Possibly both. Sarah will be going in as potential buyer, Diane continued. We've built the backstory, tech executive, recently divorced, lots of liquid assets, interested in alternative investments. James will be your backup, positioned nearby but not visible. We'll have surveillance at all known locations. What about local police? The vampire lawyer asked. They don't know. And they shouldn't. This operation requires deniability. Sarah had heard this before. Deniability was another word for, if something goes wrong, we'll deny you exist. It was part of the contract, the thing you accepted when you signed the paperwork. She'd signed it, and so had James. They'd both read the fine print. They'd both chosen to anyway. The meeting lasted 42 minutes. By the end of it, Sarah had the entire operation in her head, every name, every address, every phone number, every contingency plan. She had a gift for information architecture, things organized themselves in her mind like furniture in a well-designed room. By noon, she was home, throwing clothes into a suitcase. The burgundy blazer, Italian wool, dry clean only, went in first. Then the tactical pants, the running shoes that were actually running shoes and not trying to be anything else, the phone with the encrypted line that she would destroy in exactly 13 days. Then the cover documents, credit cards, driver's license, business cards, photographs on her phone of a fictional vacation to Cabo that she'd never taken with a fictional girlfriend named Michelle who'd never existed. David called around 2. She answered on the second ring, not too fast, not too slow. Performance metrics. Hey, he said. Just wanted to check in before you head out. You packed? Just finished actually. Drive safe. The weather's supposed to turn bad around Pittsburgh. I will. I love you, by the way. She said it while standing in their bedroom, looking at their wedding photo on the dresser, the two of them, 15 years younger, actually smiling. She meant it and didn't mean it simultaneously. This was the particular skill set required for being married while also being a ghost. You had to believe your own contradictions. Love you too, he said. Call me tonight. I'll try. Might be late. That's fine. I'll be up. He probably would be. David was a night owl, usually reading until midnight or after. He'd be reading, and she'd be in Portland in a hotel room wearing a wire, and they'd exist in that comfortable lie together, him believing she was exhausted from a day of environmental consulting, her knowing exactly what kind of exhaustion she was actually about to experience. She got to the airport by 5. The parking garage was full of people saying goodbye to their lives for a few days or a few weeks. Everyone had the same expression, that particular cocktail of anticipation and dread that accompanied any temporary displacement. Except Sarah wasn't experiencing that. Her face was blank, her movements efficient, her entire effect calibrated to prevent anyone from remembering her 15 seconds after she passed them. The flight to Portland left at 7:15 p.m. She'd chosen the middle seat deliberately. People tended not to choose middle seats, which meant no conversation. She had the entire 3-seat block empty except for one elderly woman by the window who fell asleep before takeoff. Over Pennsylvania, Sarah pulled out her laptop and reviewed the files one more time. The organization they were targeting was called Cascade Distribution, a network of tech-savvy criminals who'd figured out how to move high-end stolen intellectual property across state lines. It was worth approximately $40 million in the last fiscal year. 3 people had died so far, a whistleblower in Seattle, a FBI informant in Portland, and a distribution manager in San Francisco who'd gotten nervous and tried to go solo. The people Sarah was about to meet had killed for $40 million. The people Sarah worked for wanted to prove it. And Sarah, who existed in the space between those two facts, would have to be more clever than all of them. She landed in Portland at 10:43 p.m., got her rental car, a nondescript Hyundai, gray, completely forgettable, and drove to the hotel. The Riverside Suites had been selected specifically because it was expensive enough to be credible for her cover identity but not so expensive that it attracted the kind of attention that came with luxury. She was Ms. Sarah Peterson, according to her license. She worked in tech. She had money to invest. That was all anyone needed to know. The room was on the 4th floor, overlooking the parking lot. She'd requested it. Exits were important. Sightlines were important. Everything was important. She called David at 11:30 p.m., just to hear his voice. "How was the drive?" he asked. "Long. I'm at the hotel now." "Good. Get some sleep. You sound tired." "I am a little. Love you. Don't work too hard on those environmental assessments." He said it gently, with the kindness of someone who'd learned to live with the gaps in their marriage. Maybe he suspected something. Probably he didn't. It didn't matter either way. After they hung up, Sarah sat on the edge of the hotel bed and did something she hadn't done in 6 months. She opened a photo album on her encrypted phone. It had pictures that didn't exist anywhere else, that would be deleted the moment this operation concluded. Pictures of her and David from their anniversary trip to Vancouver 4 years ago. Pictures of Max as a puppy. Pictures of a life that was real but that she could only access when she was alone in hotel rooms in cities she'd never lived in. She closed the album and set her alarm for 6 a.m. Tomorrow was Tuesday. She was going to go to a coffee shop on Burnside Street and order a specific type of latte that would signal to a man named Derek that she was there. Derek would send someone. That someone would make contact. And from that moment forward, until the moment she got back on the plane to Newark, Sarah Mitchell would stop being Sarah Mitchell and become someone else entirely. She lay back on the hotel bed, still in her clothes, still in her shoes, and stared at the ceiling while traffic sounds drifted up from the parking lot below. Outside, Portland's night sky was the color of burnt orange and industrial gray. Inside, Sarah's mind was already 10 steps ahead, already running scenarios, already preparing for all the ways that this could go catastrophically wrong. The cafe on Burnside was called The Daily Grind, which struck Sarah as the kind of joke that had maybe been funny in 1995. It had exposed brick, Edison bulbs, and the particular smell of aggressively ethical coffee that cost $7 a cup. The clientele was exactly what she'd expected: tech workers on laptops, students with notebook towers, one person who was definitely writing a novel based on the conspicuous intensity with which they were staring at their screen. Sarah ordered a medium oat milk latte with an extra shot. The barista, blue hair, nose ring, completely incompetent, made a drink that was definitely not what she'd ordered, but it didn't matter. The important thing wasn't the drink. The important thing was that she'd walked in, ordered it, and now she was sitting at the corner table with her laptop open and her phone in front of her, angled at a specific degree. 23 minutes later, a man in a fleece vest sat down at the table behind her. He didn't acknowledge her. He ordered coffee. He opened a newspaper, actual paper newspaper, which no one read anymore and which therefore stood out like a beacon to anyone trained to notice behavioral anomalies. Sarah typed on her laptop, opened the news app, and refreshed it twice. She took a sip of her terrible latte. She was a woman waiting for her boyfriend to text back, or processing her divorce, or just someone killing time before work. She was invisible. The man behind her coughed 3 times. Sarah closed her laptop, gathered her things, and left. She didn't make eye contact. She didn't vary her pace. She walked out, got in her rental car, and drove to the next location, a public park on the east side, the kind of place where meetings happen that shouldn't be happening. She'd been taught to lose surveillance at this stage. Probably the man in the fleece vest had done the same. By the time she got to the park, she would be clean. She parked near the playground, got out, and walked the perimeter path while pretending to check email on her phone. The September weather in Portland was approximately 65 degrees and perpetually on the verge of rain. She'd chosen her outfit accordingly: jeans, a dark green sweater, a leather jacket that looked expensive without being flashy. She looked like someone with money who was trying not to seem like she had money. This was, technically, the opposite of her actual life, but that was the principle of good undercover work: start with the inverse of yourself and work inward. A man approached from the opposite direction. He was probably in his mid-40s, with the kind of fitness that came from obsessive dedication and probably steroid use. He had the face of someone who decided in his 20s that intimidation was a viable personality trait and had never reconsidered. "Sarah Peterson," he said. Not a question. He already knew. "That's me." She kept walking. He fell in beside her. "I'm Derek. We need to talk about what you're looking for. I told your people. I'm interested in making a move. I have capital to deploy. I need to know what you have available." Derek smiled. It wasn't a nice smile. It was the smile of someone who enjoyed causing minor social discomfort. "What I have available depends on what you're qualified for. We don't work with amateurs. I've already demonstrated my qualifications." This was part of the script. Diane Foster had walked through it 3 times before Sarah left Newark. "I've moved money before. I understand how to be quiet about things. I have documentation of previous investments." Derek pulled out a cigarette, lit it, and offered her one. She declined. "Smoking changed your breath, your heart rate, your psychology." She needed to maintain baseline. "Tell me about your previous investments," he said. Sarah had a story. She'd rehearsed it hundreds of times until it was indistinguishable from memory. She talked about a pharmaceutical company in the Caymans that didn't exist, about an import-export business in Singapore that she'd researched so thoroughly that she could probably actually describe the street it was on. Derek listened while smoking and walking, his body language suggesting that he was simultaneously bored and dangerous, a posture that required a specific kind of personality. "Okay," he said finally. "You seem legit. But we need insurance." Insurance. This was the moment Sarah had been waiting for. "What kind of insurance?" she asked. "We need something that proves you're committed. That you're not a cop trying to bust us." "I'm not a cop." "Probably not. But we need to be sure." Derek pulled out his phone and showed her a picture. It was a photograph of herself, the actual Sarah Mitchell, not Sarah Peterson, taken from her house in New Jersey. She was standing in the driveway with Max, both of them looking directly at the camera, as if someone had called out her name and she'd turned to look. Sarah's entire body went cold. Not in a way that showed. She'd trained her body too well to show anything. But internally, every alarm system she'd built over 42 years was screaming. "You took this?" she asked, keeping her voice level. "Not me personally. But yes. We like to know who we're working with. We take precautions. That's my house." "Yeah. Nice place. Your husband's cute. That your dog?" Everything Sarah had been trained to do was to get out. To have a panic word. To call in the cavalry. To abort. But if she aborted now, if she showed fear, she'd blown her cover. And if her cover was blown, then Derek and his people would know that she'd been getting surveillance performed on her own house. They'd know that meant FBI. And if they knew that meant FBI, then they would do exactly what organized criminals did when they got spooked: they would vanish. They would go dark. They would probably make a call to certain parties who had a vested interest in making sure Sarah Mitchell, specifically, stopped being a problem. So instead of showing fear, Sarah did something much harder. She smiled. "You're thorough," she said. "I appreciate that. I need people who are thorough." Derek grinned. "Good. Then we're going to get along. Now, let me show you what we have." They walked for another 30 minutes while Derek described their operation. He was careless about security, which was both good for the investigation and disturbing. Careless people were often capable of sudden violence. He talked about distribution networks, payment structures, the particular security protocols they used to prevent law enforcement from getting digital evidence. He talked about the 3 people who died as though they were weather events, unfortunate facts that had happened but that didn't particularly require emotional processing. By the time they parted ways, Sarah had more than enough. The information Derek had provided would fill 20 pages of a legal brief. It would be admissible in court. It would be enough. She walked back to her car trying to not think about the photograph of her house. Someone had been there. Someone had gotten close enough to capture that image, and she hadn't known. They'd probably done it more than once. They'd probably sat in a parked car across the street and watched her come and go, watched David, watched Max. They'd documented her life. She sat in the rental car for 15 minutes before starting the engine. She needed to call Diane. They needed to secure the house. David needed to be told, or maybe David shouldn't be told, or maybe David was already. No. Stop. Compartmentalization. That was the skill. That was what separated good agents from the ones who ended up with stress-induced psychotic breaks. You put the fear in its box, you locked the box, and you kept going. She drove back to the hotel and went directly to her room without checking in with the front desk. The room was exactly as she'd left it, the specific angle of her clothes, the particular way she'd arranged her toiletries. No intrusions. Good. She sat on the bed and called James. He answered on the first ring, as if he'd been waiting for the call. "Status?" he asked. "Positive contact. Derek Moss, approximately mid-40s, fit build, works as a lieutenant. He showed me security photos of my house. New Jersey. They've been conducting surveillance." Silence on the line. Then, "Of your house specifically or your cover?" "My actual house. My husband. My dog." "That's not standard," James said carefully. "That's not how they normally. I know how they normally do it. This is different." Derek said it was insurance. "But this is more than insurance." "Okay. I'm calling it in. Don't move. Don't do anything. Just stay in your hotel room. Derek's expecting me to contact him in 3 days. If I disappear, they'll know something's wrong. And if we don't pull you, your family could be in actual danger." This was the conversation they'd both known might happen. This was the reason that most field agents didn't get married, didn't have families, didn't create hostages to fortune. You couldn't be effective if you were terrified about what was happening at home. "Give me 12 hours, Sarah said. "Let me think about this. Let me figure out what they actually want." Sarah. 12 hours, James. "If things get worse, we pull the plug. But right now, we need to think strategically. If I disappear, we lose the operation. If I don't disappear, we keep the leverage." James took a long breath. She could hear the calculation happening on the other end of the line. After a moment, he said, "I'll give you 12 hours. But the moment anything changes, I'll call. I know the protocol." She hung up before he could keep going. Then she did something she hadn't done in 5 years, she called David and asked him to do something without explaining why. "I need you to take Max and stay somewhere else tonight," she said when he answered. A hotel. Somewhere public. Lots of people around. What? Sarah, what's going on? I can't explain right now. But I need you to trust me. Pack a bag, get some dog food, and go to a hotel. One of the nice ones downtown that has a restaurant, security guards, camera systems. You're scaring me, David said. I know. I'm sorry. But I will explain this. I promise I will. Just, not yet. Can you do this? There was silence. Then, okay. Okay, I'll do it. I'll take Max to the Hyatt. I'm going to call you tonight, though. And you're going to tell me what's happening. I can't. Not tonight. But soon. Very soon. She hung up and sat with the particular form of nausea that comes from knowing you've just lied to someone you loved while simultaneously being completely honest about the threat. Then she opened her laptop and started doing the kind of research that she couldn't do with the FBI's systems, the kind that would require accessing the dark web and wading through criminal forums. If Derek and his people had photos of her house, then there was a documentation trail somewhere. If there was a documentation trail, then there was a paper, digital or physical, that explained why they'd decided to surveil a woman they just met. It took her 8 hours. By 2 a.m., she'd found it. A contract. Posted in a private forum on a criminal marketplace. Someone had paid $50,000 for detailed intelligence on a woman matching her description. The contract had been posted 2 weeks ago. It requested identification of personal weak points including but not limited to family connections, financial pressures, and potential leverage. Someone knew. Someone had known before she got on the plane. Someone had paid for surveillance of her family before she'd even landed in Portland. The question was, who? Sarah stared at the screen until the letters started to blur together. Then she took her encrypted phone and called Diane Foster. It's bad, Sarah said when Diane answered, her voice hoarse from not using it for 8 hours. How bad? Someone hired a contract. They want intelligence on my family. On me. On my personal weak points. This was planned. This wasn't reactive. This was deliberate. Where's David? Diane asked immediately. Hotel downtown. I told him to go. He doesn't know why. Okay. We're pulling you. I'm sending James to get you in 4 hours. We're going to get you back to Newark, and we're going to figure out. That won't work, Sarah said. Why not? Because if I disappear, they kill David. That's what the contract means. Insurance doesn't mean, promise not to run. It means, give me leverage so that when things go bad, I have something to take from you. Diane was quiet for a long time. Then, we'll protect him. We can put a protective detail. They'll see a detail coming a mile away. These people are careful. If they see federal protection, they'll know something went wrong, and they'll move. So what are you suggesting? Sarah thought about Derek's smile. About the photo of her and Max. About the contract posted in a dark forum for anyone with $50,000 to see. I'm suggesting, Sarah said slowly, that I finish the operation. Exactly like we planned. But this time, they don't know I know that they know. And when this is over, we make absolutely sure that the leverage they think they have disappears forever. That's a problem, Diane said. Because Derek Moss was arrested in 2004 for assault. He was in a federal facility in Virginia for 18 months. And according to our records, he was released in 2006 without ever being convicted. Which means someone made him disappear. You think he's an informant? Sarah asked. I think he's something worse. I think he's an asset. And I think someone in the bureau placed that contract. The hotel room suddenly felt very small. How soon can you find out who? Sarah asked. I'm making calls now. Don't move. Don't contact anyone. Just sit tight. But Sarah didn't sit tight. Sarah grabbed her laptop, grabbed her documents, and went down to the hotel parking garage. She drove to the industrial area near the river and parked in a vacant lot behind a closed factory. Then she sat in the darkness and waited for the world to make sense. "It's Deputy Assistant Director Lawrence Webb," Diane said without preamble. "He's been running an off-book operation for 6 years. We don't know the full scope yet, but Derek Moss is definitely one of his assets. Webb has been using him to move product across state lines. The FBI doesn't know. The DOJ doesn't know. It's just Webb and maybe 3 other people in upper management." Sarah's mind went very still. Deputy Assistant Director Lawrence Webb was one of the most respected figures in the Bureau. He'd been involved in the investigation that had taken down a Mexican cartel in 2009. He'd testified in front of Congress. He had an office on the executive floor. Why? Sarah asked. What possible reason would he have? Money. What else? Derek's operation is probably clearing $5 million a year, and Webb's taking a percentage. Plus he's probably blackmailing Derek over something, probably the murder charges that disappeared when Derek was released. It's a very convenient arrangement for everyone involved. Except everyone wasn't supposed to know about it, Sarah said. Exactly. And now you do. Which means Webb has a problem. Sarah understood what Diane wasn't saying. The problem wasn't Derek anymore. The problem was Sarah. The contract that had been placed on her family, the surveillance of her house, that had been insurance for Derek in case anything went wrong. But Sarah had the ability to make things very wrong for Webb. So either Webb would try to eliminate that threat, or I finished the operation, Sarah said. I don't think finishing the operation is on the table, Diane replied carefully. I think we need to get you to safety first. If I run, David's at risk. Permanently. Because Webb will know I'm out there, and he'll know I can connect him to Derek, and he'll want to make sure David can't give testimony. The only way David is safe is if we finish this in a way that makes both Derek and Webb believe I'm compromised. That I'm not a threat. How do you propose we do that? I need to become exactly what Webb thinks I am. Someone who's been turned. Someone who's now working for Derek instead of for the Bureau. Someone with a very compelling reason not to talk. That's a suicide mission, Diane said flatly. Once you're turned, we can't protect you. You can't protect me anyway. Webb has assets everywhere. The moment he figures out you know about him, you're compromised too. So the only play here is to go all the way in. Become one of them. Get evidence from the inside that proves Webb's complicity, and then we use that evidence to burn him. Who are you and what have you done with Sarah Mitchell? Diane asked, but there was something in her voice, resignation maybe, or possibly admiration for a kind of courage that most people would classify as insanity. I'm still Sarah Mitchell, Sarah said. I'm just also everyone else I need to be. They talked through the logistics for the next hour. Diane would appear to be part of the cover-up. She would make calls suggesting that Sarah had been compromised and that the operation needed to be abandoned. She would let those calls get intercepted by Webb's people. She would be the person who folded. Meanwhile, Sarah would make contact with Derek again and tell him she wanted to propose a mutually beneficial arrangement. She would tell him that she'd discovered certain things about her FBI handlers that made her reconsider her allegiances. She would offer him access to something valuable, the specific location of another FBI safe house in Portland that would be perfect for his operation. She would be the asset who'd flipped. And then, from the inside, she would gather everything she needed to take down both Derek and Webb. What about David? Sarah asked before they hung up. We're putting him and Max in a secure location. He doesn't need to know why. Just someone he trusts tells him it's a precaution because of your case. Standard protocol for family of agents in field operations. Sarah called David herself at 4 a.m. He answered immediately, which meant he'd been awake the entire time. "I'm at the hotel," he said without her asking. "Max is asleep." "What's going on?" "I need you to trust me," Sarah said. "Can you do that?" "Of course I can. You're my wife." The words landed like a punch. He had no idea how little he actually knew her. How much of the person he'd married was performance. How many times she'd lied while telling the truth or told the truth while lying. "There's a man going to call you tomorrow," she continued. "His name is James Chen. He works with me. He's going to say that he needs to move you and Max to a secure location for protective purposes. You need to go with him without asking questions." "Sarah. I can't explain right now. But this is the most important thing I'm ever going to ask you to do. Not for me. But for your safety. For Max's safety. Can you do that?" A long silence. Then, "Okay. Okay, I'll go with your friend. But when this is over, we're talking. We're actually talking about what's happening. No more evasions. No more half-truths. When this is over," Sarah said, "I'll tell you everything." She hung up and drove back to the hotel. She slept for 2 hours, the kind of sleep that was more like unconsciousness than actual rest. Then she showered, dressed in clothes that Derek had never seen her in, and drove to the coffee shop. Derek wasn't there. But a different man was, older, with a scar across his left cheekbone and the particular way of holding his shoulders that suggested military background. He was sitting at the corner table with a newspaper. Sarah recognized the signal. She sat down. "Derek's wondering if you're ready to talk about more," the man said quietly. "That depends," Sarah said. "Is Derek wondering that, or is someone else wondering that?" The man's expression didn't change. "Does it matter?" "It matters if the someone else is law enforcement." "It's not." "Are you sure?" "Because I need to be sure. Because if I walk into a trap, I walk into a trap with a very specific knowledge that certain federal agents have been compromised. And I'm thinking maybe I want to use that knowledge to my advantage rather than theirs." The man leaned back. He looked at Sarah for a long moment, really looked at her, as though he was trying to solve a puzzle. "What kind of knowledge?" he asked finally. "The kind that comes from 6 years of watching a deputy assistant director run a black operation from inside the bureau. The kind that tells me there are at least 3 other people on the inside who are part of it. The kind that tells me that Derek Moss is small potatoes compared to what's actually happening." She was gambling now. She was throwing out information that she knew would get back to Webb and hoping that Webb's ego would be just large enough to believe that she'd somehow figured out the whole operation. The man stood up. "I need to make a call." He walked away. Sarah sat with her terrible coffee and tried not to think about what she'd just done. She'd essentially declared war on the FBI itself. If this didn't work, she wouldn't just be fired. She'd be disappeared, like Derek Moss before his arrest record had been erased. She'd be a problem that needed solving. 40 minutes later, the man came back. "You're meeting with Derek tomorrow night," he said. 9 p.m. The address is 412, East Morrison Street. Warehouse. 3rd floor. Don't be late. And bring the information." "What information?" Sarah asked. "The information about the compromised agents. We're going to need that for insurance." Sarah smiled her invisible smile. "Of course I will." She drove away from the coffee shop and spent the next 12 hours doing something dangerous. She created false evidence. With Diane's help over encrypted channels, she constructed a fake document showing that 3 specific FBI agents had been taking money from Derek's operation. The evidence was good enough to be believable but imperfect enough to be plausible. The kind of thing a whistleblower might cobble together from fragments of information. She prepared printouts, made copies, and packed them in a manila envelope. Then, at 8:45 p.m. on a Thursday night in Portland, Oregon, Sarah Mitchell walked into a warehouse on East Morrison Street, climbed 3 flights of stairs, and knocked on a door that opened to reveal Derek Moss sitting at a card table with 2 other men, and also sitting in the corner, with his arms folded across his chest and his expression completely neutral, Deputy Assistant Director Lawrence Webb. Sarah didn't react. She'd been trained not to react, had spent her entire career not reacting. But inside her chest, her heart rate had accelerated from approximately 70 bpm to somewhere north of 120. She could feel the blood in her veins, the adrenaline flooding her system, the particular sensation of standing at the edge of a precipice and seeing the drop clearly for the first time. "Lawrence," she said, nodding. She kept her tone light, conversational. She was playing a person who'd walked into a situation she'd partially expected. "I wasn't sure you'd actually show." "Wouldn't miss it," Webb said. He was in his 60s, silver-haired, the kind of man who probably took his coffee black and exercised 4 times a week. He had the face of a man who'd convinced himself that whatever he was doing for good reasons. "Derek said you wanted to discuss mutual business interests." "I wanted to discuss survival," Sarah said. She set the manila envelope on the card table. "For all of us." Derek didn't open the envelope. He just stared at it like it might explode. The other 2 men looked at Webb. Webb looked at Sarah. "Survival," Webb repeated. "That's an interesting word choice." "Is it?" "I'm living in a hotel. My family is living in another hotel. There's a contract with my name on it. I'm thinking survival is the operative concept." Webb stood up and walked toward her. He moved like someone who was very comfortable taking up space. "You understand what you're about to do? You're about to give me leverage. Real leverage. Not the kind that Derek thinks he has, just some photos of your house. Real leverage. The kind that puts you inside something that you can't get out of." "I understand," Sarah said. "I'm going to give you documentation of 3 federal agents who've been taking money from Derek's operation. I'm going to give you enough evidence to compromise them if they ever decide to talk. And in exchange, you're going to promise that nothing happens to my family." Webb considered this. He had a particular way of thinking that you could see in his face, the careful calculation of a man used to operating outside normal parameters. He was running numbers, doing probability analysis, figuring out whether she was worth the risk. "The agents," he said finally. "Which 3? Sarah didn't answer immediately. Instead, she picked up the envelope and opened it. She spread the documents across the card table. They were good forgeries. Diane had had a contact at a counterfeiting operation in New Jersey who owed the Bureau a favor. The documents showed payment transfers, emails, the kind of paper trail that looked convincing if you didn't examine it too closely. "Agents Martinez, Holloway, and Chen," Sarah said. Webb's expression flickered. It was barely a movement, the microsecond reveal of surprise, but Sarah caught it. "James." She'd just thrown James under the bus in front of the Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI. She'd made him appear to be part of an operation that would be unthinkable if it were real, because it would destroy him just as surely as it would destroy anyone else. Webb was now looking at her as though she'd just proven that she was capable of anything. "Chen," Webb repeated. "Interesting choice. He's been my partner for 4 years. He knows everything about my life. He knows my husband. He knows where I live. And he's the kind of person who would turn if the pressure was right." Sarah was building a story, creating a narrative that would make sense to someone like Webb. The kind of person who could justify anything if it made logical sense. Webb didn't care about truth. Webb cared about utility. He needed to understand how Sarah could be useful to him. "What do you want?" Webb asked. "I want out," Sarah said. "I want to stop being a federal agent. I want to stop lying to my husband. I want to take the money that Derek's organization is offering and disappear. I want to create a new identity in another country and start a new life. And I want your help doing that, because you're the only person who has the ability to make it look like I'm dead. This was the trap. This was the thing she was counting on. Webb had to want to believe that she was real, that she was actually willing to betray the Bureau, actually willing to become a criminal, actually willing to do any of the things she was describing. Because if he didn't want to believe it, the alternative was that she was an undercover agent playing a long game. And Webb was too smart to think that. So he would choose to believe the version that made him feel superior to her, the version where she was just another person who decided the Bureau was worthless and had chosen survival over principle. I'll need time to verify the information, Webb said finally. Of course. And I'll need to have some insurance that you're not recording this conversation. Sarah reached into her pocket slowly, making sure not to make any sudden movements, and pulled out her encrypted phone. She set it on the table and powered it off. I'm not equipped. Derek leaned forward and ran a scanner over her body, one of the handheld devices that detected electronic surveillance equipment. It beeped softly at her belt, which contained nothing but a normal phone that would show absolutely nothing if anyone ever examined it. The scanner was looking for active wireless signals. Her actual recording device was a miniature device embedded in a false root canal that she'd had created 3 weeks ago. It was completely undetectable to anything short of a dental X-ray. The scanner didn't beep again. Okay, Webb said. Here's what's going to happen. You're going to remain available. Derek's people will contact you. You're going to help facilitate a distribution network that moves product through a series of boutique retailers in the Northeast. In exchange, Derek's organization is going to compensate you. And I'm going to help facilitate your disappearance once the operation is secure. And if the Bureau figures out what I did? Sarah asked. They won't. Because as far as the Bureau is concerned, you had a psychological break in the field. You've been compromised by enemy assets. You're a security risk. And you're being terminated with extreme prejudice. Your disappearance will be attributed to Derek's organization. The case will be closed. And everyone will move on. Sarah had to stop herself from shaking. She was hearing Webb describe her own death. It was a strange experience, hearing a man you'd worked within the same organization describe, in neutral tones, the procedure for making you disappear forever. And if I can't facilitate the network, she asked. Then we'll have to reconsider our arrangement. And reconsideration in this situation is rarely pleasant. Sarah nodded. I understand. Good. Derek will contact you in 24 hours. In the meantime, you stay available. You don't run. You don't call anyone. You don't do anything that would suggest you've had second thoughts. Can you do that? Yes, Sarah said. And the terrifying part was that she meant it. She was so deep into the operation now that she had no choice but to follow it through. She left the warehouse at 9:47 p.m. She drove back to her hotel with her hands gripping the steering wheel at exactly 10:02, her breathing carefully controlled, her mind compartmentalized into 3 separate sections, the part that was processing what had just happened, the part that was already planning the next move, and the part that was very carefully not thinking about the fact that she was completely alone now. Diane couldn't help her. James couldn't help her. Nobody from the Bureau could help her because Webb was inside the Bureau and he would know within hours if anyone tried. She had only herself, her training, and the thin recorder embedded in her tooth. She was back in her hotel room by 10:15 p.m. She sat on the bed and let herself shake for exactly 5 minutes. Then she stopped. Then she called a number from her encrypted phone, a number that was not in any Bureau database, that Diane had created specifically for this purpose. Status? Diane's voice came through. I'm in, Sarah said. He bought it. Webb bought the entire thing. Are you wearing? Yes. Full recording. Can you get out? Not yet. He wants me to help with a distribution network. I need to stay embedded long enough to get full conversation evidence of Webb's involvement. That's 2, maybe 3 weeks. I know. Your family. My family is with James. They're safe. For now, I need to make sure they stay that way. Okay, Diane said. I'm going to start building a case against Webb. I'm going to use your evidence, but I'm going to need more. I'm going to need proof that he's been giving Derek contract information, proof that he's been taking payments, proof that he's the one who ordered the surveillance of your family. I'll get it, Sarah said. After she hung up, she sat in the hotel room and thought about David. He was probably in some safe house in Pennsylvania right now, in a room that looked exactly like this one, generic art on the walls, neutral bedding, a television showing the same cable news channels. He was probably trying to explain to Max why they'd left home so suddenly. He was probably wondering if his wife was alive. She called him, using her regular phone, from the hotel's landline to make it impossible to trace exactly where she was calling from. "Hi," she said when he answered. "Where are you?" His voice was tight, controlled. He sounded the way he probably sounded at his college finals, like someone trying to keep his mind organized while his emotions were threatening to scatter everywhere. "I can't tell you that." "Is it over?" "No. It's just beginning." "But David, I need you to know something. I need you to know that I love you. I need you to know that every moment of our marriage, even the moments where I was lying, especially those moments, I meant every bit of what I said about loving you. Does that make sense?" "No," David said. "None of this makes sense. James won't tell me anything. He just said it was a precaution. He said you'd explain everything when this was over." "I will. I promise I will. But for now, I need you to be safe. I need you to stay with James. I need you to take care of Max. Can you do that?" "Sarah, you're scaring me." "I know. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry about all of this." She hung up before he could respond, before she could hear any more of the fear in his voice. Then she lay on the hotel bed, still fully clothed, and stared at the ceiling while the hours turned into tomorrow. Derek's people called at 11:47 a.m. the next day with a location. It was a strip mall in Salem, about 45 minutes south of Portland. A nail salon that served as a front for a wholesale operation of stolen electronics. Sarah drove down in her rental car, parked in the lot, and went inside. The nail salon smelled like formaldehyde and optimism. There were 3 women working on nails, none of them paying attention to Sarah as she walked to the back office. Derek was there, along with a woman Sarah didn't recognize. "This is Stephanie," Derek said. "She runs logistics for the Northwest distribution." "Stephanie, this is Sarah. She's going to be helping us set up a retail network." Stephanie was probably in her 50s, with the kind of face that suggested she'd made a lot of hard choices and had made peace with them. She nodded at Sarah and gestured to a chair. "We need someone on the inside," Stephanie said. "Someone who can move product through legitimate retail channels. Tech stores, electronics shops, places where stolen goods look like regular merchandise. Can you do that?" "How much product are we talking about?" Sarah asked. "About 50,000 units a month. Laptops, tablets, phones. Stuff that moves quickly, that people buy without thinking too hard about provenance. We have the supply. We need the distribution." Sarah was recording all of this, the numbers, the details, the specific way that Stephanie described the operation. Everything was evidence. Everything was ammunition. "I can do it," Sarah said. "But I'm going to need to know the supply chain. I need to know where the product is coming from, how it's getting here, who's managing it. I can't sell something if I don't understand it." Stephanie smiled. It was not a warm smile. "Smart. That's good. You'll need that intelligence to stay alive in this business." For the next 2 hours, Sarah sat in the back of a nail salon in Salem, Oregon, and listened to a detailed description of how $40 million of stolen intellectual property and hardware was being moved across the country. She learned about the warehouses, the shipping companies that were paid to look the other way, the network of retail partners who accepted deliveries that were marked as legitimate purchases. She learned about the payment structure, the offshore accounts, the money laundering apparatus that made dirty money look clean. And most importantly, she learned about Lawrence Webb's role. Webb wasn't just taking a cut. Webb was the person who'd eliminated the FBI's surveillance capabilities for the Northeast sector. Webb was the person who'd made certain arrests disappear. Webb was the person who'd turned federal investigation files into a tool for Derek's organization to use to avoid law enforcement. Stephanie described Webb's visits. She talked about the payments, $50,000 a month, wired to an account in the Cayman Islands. She talked about the photograph that Webb had provided of Sarah's house, about the contract that Webb had arranged. Webb had wanted to know if Sarah was a risk. Webb had arranged insurance. Every word was going into the false root canal in Sarah's mouth. When she left the nail salon, Sarah had approximately 4 hours of continuous recording of criminal conspiracy at the highest levels of federal law enforcement. She drove back to Portland and spent the night doing something she'd been avoiding. She went online and found a news site. She searched for stories about federal agents. And she found one. Federal agent found dead in Jersey apartment. The article described James Chen. Apparent suicide. She read it 3 times, trying to make the words mean something other than what they clearly meant. She called Diane on her encrypted line. "He's dead," Sarah said. There was a long silence on the other end. Then Diane said, "We know. We're investigating it now. The preliminary report says suicide, but the autopsy is being expedited." "It wasn't suicide," Sarah said. "Webb killed him. Webb killed him because I told him that James was one of the compromised agents." "I know. Diane, I just told a man that James was dirty, and Webb responded by killing him. I got him killed." "No," Diane said, and her voice was very steady. "Webb got him killed. Webb killed him. This is on Webb. Not on you." But Sarah couldn't quite believe that. She'd put James's name in the story. She'd made him into the perfect mark for a man like Webb, someone who was already a threat, someone who could be eliminated and have it look like something he did to himself. Sarah had handed Webb the narrative he needed. "I need to finish this," Sarah said. "I need to get the last piece." "It's too dangerous," Diane said. "We have enough. We have hours of recording. We have evidence of conspiracy, money laundering, obstruction of justice. We can move now. If you move now, Webb disappears. He has resources. He has the ability to vanish. If I can get him on record, if I can get him talking about James specifically, about what he did I can do this," Sarah said. "I have to do this." She hung up before Diane could say anything else. The call from Webb came 3 hours later. Sarah was in her hotel room, packing up the equipment she wouldn't need anymore, when her encrypted phone rang. "Your first assignment comes through tomorrow," Webb's voice said. "I want you to take a shipment of electronics to Newark. I want you to work with the retail partners there to establish a distribution network. Can you do that?" "Yes," Sarah said. "Good. There's also someone I want you to meet while you're there. An old friend of yours. Someone who might be able to help smooth the transition." Sarah's blood went cold. She knew exactly what Webb was doing. He was calling her back to Newark. He was going to bring her to somewhere contained where he could control the situation. And he was going to have someone there, someone from the bureau, someone he'd already turned or someone he was planning to turn, who would help eliminate the last loose end. "Who?" Sarah asked, keeping her voice level. "You'll see when you get there. Just know that this person will be instrumental in helping you disappear. This person will be your new identity. Your handler, in a way." After they hung up, Sarah made a decision. She called David one last time. "I need you to do something for me," she said. "Anything. I need you to take Max and drive to Pennsylvania. There's a cabin in Fayetteville, I'll text you the address. I need you to drive there and I need you to stay there until you hear from me. Sarah, what's happening? I'm going to finish something. But I need you to be somewhere that Webb's people can't find you. The question hit her like a physical blow. You know about James? It's on the news. He died. They're saying suicide, but, are you involved? No, Sarah said. But I'm involved in something that led to his death. And I'm going to fix it. She gave him the address of a cabin owned by Diane Foster, in her ex-wife's name, in a state that had no obvious connection to Sarah or David or anyone else in this situation. David promised to go there. He promised to wait. He promised to keep Max safe. Then Sarah drove to Portland International Airport at 5 a.m. with her car packed with everything she needed for the journey back east. She landed in Newark at 2 p.m. She got a rental car and drove directly to a warehouse in the industrial section of the city. The warehouse was identical to the one in Portland, same concrete floors, same lack of windows, same sense of being outside the normal world. Derek was there, along with 2 other men. But Webb was also there. And Webb was not alone. He had with him a man that Sarah recognized from orientation videos and bureau training sessions, Assistant Special Agent in Charge Michael Torres, the head of Internal Affairs. Thank you, Sarah replied, playing the part of someone who just successfully turned her back on everything. I want to introduce you to Michael. Michael is handling certain, sensitive operational matters. Michael is the person who's going to help facilitate your transition. Torres didn't smile. He just looked at Sarah with the expression of someone who'd been told she was a problem that needed solving. Do you? Because you've betrayed the Bureau. You've given state secrets to criminals. You've compromised ongoing investigations. That's not the kind of thing that just goes away. I know, Sarah said. That's why Webb is helping me disappear. Torres laughed. It wasn't a nice laugh. Oh, Webb is helping you disappear. That's right. Webb is definitely going to help you disappear. And then Sarah understood. Webb wasn't helping her disappear because he wanted her alive somewhere else. Webb was helping her disappear because he wanted her dead, and Torres was the person who was going to make it happen. Torres was the cleanup. Torres was the solution to the problem that Sarah had become. You're a problem, Torres said, stepping closer to her. You know too much. You've been inside too long. Webb's arrangement with Derek was supposed to be clean, but you've made it messy. You've made yourself into a liability. Sarah's hand moved toward the weapon she was carrying, a small 9mm that she'd acquired when she'd landed, but Torres already had a gun in his hand. He was faster. He was better trained. But Sarah had already made her move. She wasn't going for Torres. She was going for the door. She threw herself behind a concrete pillar just as Torres fired. The shot went wild, hitting the wall somewhere behind her. Derek shouted something. Webb started to move. Sarah ran. She ran like every agent was trained to run, with purpose, with knowledge of the warehouse layout, with the understanding that she had approximately 45 seconds before they organized themselves into pursuit. She made it out a back exit into the industrial yard. There were trucks, stacks of pallets, another warehouse behind this one. She ran for the nearest truck, climbed into the cab, and found the keys still in the ignition. Someone had left the engine idling. She started the truck just as Torres emerged from the warehouse. He fired 3 shots, all of them ricocheting off the metal truck. Sarah threw the truck into reverse and accelerated hard. The truck lurched backward, picked up speed, and collided with a stack of pallets behind her. She hit the brakes, threw it into drive, and headed for the street. Behind her, Torres was already running for another vehicle. She had maybe 2 minutes before he caught up. She had the advantage of being in a full-size delivery truck. He had the advantage of knowing how to drive at speed. She drove like she'd been trained to drive, aggressive, unpredictable, using the environment. She headed for the commercial district, where there were more vehicles, more people, more complications for anyone trying to pursue her with a gun. She parked the truck in a municipal garage and ran for the exit on foot. She was 2 blocks away when she heard the sirens. Real sirens. Police sirens, not FBI. That meant someone had called 911. That meant the situation had escalated into the civilian law enforcement sphere.